and it impacts the best of us. So if you're out there listening to this and you're saying, well, it's just me, it's not just you. It is almost everybody, including myself.
Be in it, but don't live the anxiety twice. If it's going to be a bad event, it's going to be a shitty event, don't live it twice.
My thing is, what I work with my clients, I make the perspective shift there is discipline is nothing but the highest form of self-love.
This is the Coaches Council, made up of 6 elite coaches dedicated to serving and ending personal struggle for high performers in business, health, and relationships. As a collective, we have built and helped build 6, 7, and 8-figure businesses, dominate in multiple industries, coached and played in professional sports leagues, and developed some of the strongest and most intimate relationships, both professional and personal. This isn't your average podcast. It's for the hungry, the dedicated, the doers, for those that have a dream and truly want that dream to become reality. People who want to take action, leave their ego at the door, and own every level of their life. If that's you, then step into the Coaches Council as we rewrite the truths to living that high-performance life.
Welcome back to another week of the Coaches Council. Purdeep, great to see you. I've been looking at your Instagram lately, and I see you put out a new book.
Oh yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, but it's actually coming out December 1st. It's officially launching then. So we're in the pre-launch phase.
I love it.
Yeah, a lot going on.
I love it. Just as Elise and I are launching the Couples Academy starting December 1st, Purdeep has a book coming out December 1st. So December is going to be a great month to level yourself up and gain that momentum going into 2020. So be sure to look for Purdeep's book. If you want more information on the Couples Academy, justownit.co. And then Purdeep, where can people get the book?
People can, depending on when this episode is coming out, you can go to completemanbook.com. We're just working on it's not official yet, but once December 1st comes around, that site will be up and running.
I love it. All about leveling up, guys, in every way, shape, or form. And I know if you're listening to this, whether you're listening to it in the car, whether you're listening to it at home, eating breakfast with your kids, it's always about showing up and the consistency of showing up. And today we've got Sam Morris. Sam is based in Austin, Texas. Sam, it's great to see you. Great to have you. Thank you for coming on.
Justin, great to be here. Purdeep, great to meet you. And congratulations on that book. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Sam, I've been so curious about your story for so long and the work that you're doing, from being able to help people level up mentally and be able to break through a lot of these barriers of self-sabotage, core beliefs that limit people, and truly tapping into another level of consciousness and another level of success. Because we so often see some of the brightest minds and the most successful people being able to tap into new levels of beliefs and new ways of thinking, but we almost take that for granted a lot of the time. And I'm curious as to what has a lot of your work been focused on, and what are some of the trends that you're seeing, especially with this new work from home, remote work, remote learning setup that we've now found ourselves in?
Yeah, so you mentioned consciousness. That's a huge one. And there's like a state of consciousness where, we are conscious leaders, conscious thinkers, but there's also consciousness means to me awareness. So a lot of what I do is, people can be 99% completely happy and successful in their life, but that 1% that is something from their childhood or something from the past, some trigger that they're not aware of, that will come back and get them. And it takes up massive amounts of bandwidth. So when you talk about, showing up and leveling up and all that stuff, you can get to a certain point and do all the work and the leg work and the mindset work and the physical work and all the stuff it takes to get there. And then you get there and this one little thing, like a deeply subconscious fear will crop up and just completely throw you off. And you'll get there and you won't be able to handle the success. You won't be able to really break through that barrier of, whether it's making more money, whether it's falling in love, whatever it may be. If you have that hanger on, that little, that hook that's still in you, you're going to be at risk for losing basically everything you've created.
So, Sam, why do you think why is it so easy for people to overlook that?
Well, it's because they, like I said, and you mentioned the new working from home stuff. It's stuff that has never really been looked at as, the formative years when it's like, ages 8 to maybe 18. When we go through all these experiences, then 18 we go off to college, and 22 we're in the workforce. These things that kind of affected us were very easily swept under the rug by a successful career, meeting a woman and falling in love. Like all these things they're just swept under the rug in a sense that they just didn't matter, because like everything else was so good. And then you get to a certain point where all the stuff is there, but then a huge change happens, like coronavirus, where you're quarantined. And now, like, for men, like men didn't have an office to go to, or they didn't have a routine to set into. So what it did is it created more bandwidth for the guys, but it also created space for all that stuff they hadn't dealt with to come in, the insecurities, the fears, the stuff that, like whether it was a relationship with their father, their mother, their friends picked on them, they got broken up with a girl, like all these things that got swept under the rug and looked past by other successes now come screaming back in the form of insecurity. Like we don't have the quote unquote manly, I'm taking care of the family kind of thing in the typical sense anymore. And so that will sabotage a lot of guys because they just haven't dealt with the stuff that was always underlying there.
That's really interesting that you say that, because I see that quite a bit now. I think so many people they're forced to have that time with themselves.
Yeah.
And sit down, and that time to self-reflect can be scary, as you mentioned, for a lot of guys. I see that. And I think maybe it's just a product of our environment. I think we're just so busy, just with society as usual, that we're so used to just go, and not being able to spend that time. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is that mindfulness space, right? Just being aware, being conscious, just being able to sit with yourself, and people are being forced, and a lot of people are uncomfortable. So what would be your recommendation for those people that are feeling that discomfort?
The macro answer to that is, look at that discomfort. Take a look at why, like, it's life is about, repetition. So if something that's uncomfortable and you're sitting with this uncomfortable silence, all this free time, and you're used to being busy and you're not, it takes the awareness of it, the consciousness of it, that this is uncomfortable for me. And really take it a step back, and you have to look at, why is this uncomfortable for me? What makes this, why am I so attached to the go? Why am I so committed to like always being busy and always being on the go and always having something to do? So really ask yourself the questions of, why is this hard for me?
Yeah, great points.
It's curious that we're talking about this, because there's a quote from Brene Brown that is so impactful, and she talks about how our instinct is to run away from pain, and that in fact most of us we're never taught how to hold on to discomfort, or sit with it, or communicate with it, or only how to discharge it, or dump it away, or put it onto somebody else, or to pretend that it's not happening. But if we combine that instinct with the avoidance of pain, it's easy to understand why offloading it becomes a habit, because it both nurtures us to hold off and load off the emotion and discomfort into other people. But the irony is that at the exact same time, we're creating more and more distance from ourselves and the people around us by who we're offloading it onto, and thus creating emotional disconnect between everybody, when in fact what we're trying to do by doing that is create emotional connection and enriching those emotional lives of others. But how do we sit in it? What does that first step become for a lot of us?
Well, I think the reason that fear crops up that you're talking about, and that like initial response of like stuff it away and get rid of it, is because what we've operated in for so long is just the event. Like if it's anxiety, for example, like all that people really know is feeling anxious. They don't understand why they feel anxious or what led them to feeling that anxiety attack, or that, heightened anxiety, because it's all about like treating symptoms. So what people recognize is they recognize the pain. So when you recognize only the pain, that means that all your memory banks are based around pain, which is the opposite of what the subconscious and everything in our body wants to feel. We are all, our subconscious and our bodies, all we are about is protecting ourselves from pain. But yet we have these experiences like walking into, like say you're walking into a meeting, and it's one meeting that you have once a month with this, like you're in real estate, for example, you meet with a property owner once a month to see how the property is going. But this particular meeting gives you wicked anxiety, but every other meeting you're fine. It's because, and so all you know is that this meeting, I experience anxiety. So every time you're there, you immediately get dumped into this anxious, fearful, painful experience. Now, that all you do at that point is you deflect and you stuff. Basically, you say, I'm not feeling this. I'm going to show up anyways and do it. In reality, though, what you have to do is you have to say, like, reverse engineer that event. So if the event is the anxiety at that particular meeting, like maybe that office building makes you think of some building when you were a kid that was very uncomfortable for you. Or maybe the guy that you're meeting with reminds you of your friend's dad that was really mean. Something about, like, there's some trail to why that particular meeting gives you anxiety. So if you can reverse engineer the event, start to back out of it, like maybe it's Wednesdays that you have that meeting, and Wednesday's a bad day for you. I mean, it could be anything. That's just an example. But if you can look at like the hour before, the day before, the week before, the month before, 6 months before, all the way, and you in small steps back, and then you get to the point where, like, what is the real, sponsoring event that why this meeting is so uncomfortable for me? So the first step is you have to really just like take a step back and say, why? Like, what about this? Like, because in your body, you walk in and you're like, oh, your energy dips, your shoulders slouch, you get hot, like your thoughts get all racy. Like there's triggers in the body that let you know this is uncomfortable and this is painful and we're scared right now. So if you can take a step back and look at why those things are happening, then you can start to say, you can start to differentiate reality and the drama behind it.
It's such a great point, because going back to Brene Brown a little bit, and I love her work. She's so strong in all of these aspects. But there's a quote that goes, I spent years trying to outrun or outsmart vulnerability by making certain and definite black and white, good and bad choices. My inability to learn and lean into the discomfort or vulnerability, which is exactly what you're talking about, limited the fullness of those important experiences that are wrought with uncertainty, love, belonging, trust, joy, just to name a few. So correct me if I'm wrong, kind of what you're saying is that by just going in and stuffing everything down in those uncomfortable situations, be it that meeting on the Wednesday in this certain building, and just kind of throwing them down there saying, I'm just going to muscle through, you're completely taking yourself out of that present moment and living in a past emotion, a past experience, that you're now robbing yourself of any new type of experience, any new type of memory, any new type of value that you can get from that present sense, simply because you're not willing to be vulnerable or lean into the discomfort of why that was happening. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, boil that down. It becomes like that event, as long as you stuff that down, that event holds its ownership over you. And until you address it, until you reverse it, until you find out. So one of my favorite guys is Peter Crone. He says, future fear, future anxiety is nothing but past pain representing in reality. So until you can address it and look at what that past pain is and why it's causing your future fear, future anxiety, that event, that office building, that Wednesday, that guy, that meeting will have complete ownership over you and will completely rob you of any connection, presence, and eventually, like, probably money and love and all the things that we want.
That's such a powerful quote. And I'm curious, Purdeep, because you work with so many men. You work with so many men on on a lot of time this exact stuff. What are patterns that you typically start to see that lead to this level of avoidance?
That lead to the level of avoidance. So patterns is basically, you can say, I'll just give an example. Yesterday, I was on a call with one of my clients and we were talking about his business growth and having a plan. And we talked about, there being about $40,000 worth of business available every week for him to be able to capture for his business, additional business. And when we were having the conversation, I said, okay, so what are we going to do to capture it? You're saying that it's out there and it's easy to get. What are we going to do? And he said, well, I got to do this. I got to do this. I said, okay, so next week, what are we going to do? And there's so much hesitation in it. And you could tell. And so I basically said, I said, what's going on? If someone told me that there's 40 grand worth of business out there next week and all I need to do was go out there and drum it up, I'd be out there doing it. And so when we got to the hesitation, it really comes back to what Sam and you were talking about, Justin. It really comes back to what he had some really bad deals in the past that he lost a lot of money. And so that was stopping him from actually moving forward. So a lot of the times when you're asking about the pattern, a lot of it is hesitation. A lot of it is procrastination. We make up, or keep ourselves busy. We'll end up. So one of his challenges, so-called challenges, was that he's so busy in the operations that he doesn't have time to do the other stuff. So we will come up with stuff to do that will hold us back from really looking at the stuff that we should be looking at. So that can be a pattern inside our mind, is when we know that there's opportunity or we know that there's some kind of ability for us to do something, but we're still not doing it. That's a red flag for us to say, well, why not? What is it that's really holding us back? That's what I see, because I see so much, especially in the business world, there's so much potential out there. And working with business owners and entrepreneurs, they know the opportunity is there, but they're just not acting on it. And there's something there that's holding them back. And just being able to uncover that, and sometimes that's not even enough. Sometimes bringing it to life and bringing it to the forefront isn't enough. They need something else, and that's why sometimes having a coach is a positive, you can say, enabler for them, or whether some other support system. Sometimes people just need that, hey, look, you can do it. Whatever it is that you're dealing with, it's okay. You can move forward. We're here to support you, whatever that looks like. And especially working with guys. I work with grown men. I work with guys that range from in the 30s to guys that are in the early 70s, and even very, very successful people. And I can tell you, it doesn't matter. Guys from all walks of life, we all have the same challenges when it comes to that. Those fears, those things that we don't want to look at, looking in the mirror sometimes, and it impacts the best of us. So if you're out there listening to this and you're saying, well, it's just me, it's not just you. It is almost everybody, including myself.
Hey, Coaches Council listeners. Coaches Council is partnered with Can I Brands, a trusted sport, fitness, and wellness CBD company. And to be honest, I've been using Can I Sleep all natural CBD oil for probably the last 2.5 years. And the spray specifically has been able to help me get a good night's sleep and truly affect the way I show up every single day to optimize my performance. And that's just not my own personal take on it, because I track my sleep every day with the Whoop Band and have been able to see the trends that have happened. My deep REM sleep has improved. My slow wave sleep has improved. My overall recovery has improved. My HRV is on the upward trend. All the things that we are looking for as entrepreneurs and executives to optimize our performance day in, day out. So their products are trusted by professional athletes and coaches just like us on the council alike. So be sure to check out their website at canibrands.com. That's CANIBRANDS.com, and use the code COACHES20 for 20% off all products just like Can I Sleep and other CBD solutions to help with pain, inflammation, energy, mental focus, and anxiety. Now back to the show. Purdeep, it's such a great thing that you bring that up, because you're never alone in a lot of the things. So often we think that we're alone. So often we feel like we're on an island and it's only me experiencing this. And from what you've said, Sam, what you've said, it seems to be this pattern and this cyclical loop that we get ourselves in, no matter what the example is, that there's something in our past, there's something in our mind, there's something in our subconscious that affects the way we think, that affects the way we operate, thus changes our emotions, which changes our actions, which changes our results. Sam, what is a way to interrupt that loop? Once we gain this level of awareness, once we understand that there's something that's holding us back, we're not doing what we could be doing, there's something leveling us back. What is a way that we can interrupt this loop and create a change in the result that we're getting?
One of the first things is the recognition of it. And so you have to move out of the recognition of I feel anxiety right now, or I feel fear right now. So that's like, it's too late at that point. Like you're deep in it. You're gonna suffer for a little bit because you've waited too long to address this thing. So you're gonna feel anxious for a few days, or at that meeting, you're gonna be fearful until the event passes. But the thing is that you have to recognize, the sooner that you can recognize when you're starting to feel triggered, the sooner that you can interrupt the pattern. And there's tons of, I mean, you could do interrupts. There's mental interrupts with meditation, breathing. There's physical interrupts where, like, some people, I'm going to clap right now, so it'll be loud, but like a clap is a biological reset. So if you feel yourself going down a road and, your brain's just spinning out with you, just like a loud clap and a deep breath will reset your biology. If you notice, like animals, for example, lions is an example that I see a lot, is that after they chase a gazelle in the African bush, they'll whatever happens, they'll shake it off and they'll just reset their biology. And so humans, we tend to more so sit in the fear and just go down this road until it's like we're just stuck, paralyzed in fear. But if we can recognize these patterns sooner, like the minute you feel your energy dip, or if you're like that meeting on Wednesday, if you have that meeting on Wednesday and on Monday you think about getting prepared for it and your energy drops, like find out, like that's an opportunity for you to look to set yourself up better for that connection in that meeting. And I think too, I was going to ask Purdeep about this, is that one of the best ways to recognize it is to kind of like get rid of any kind of correlation. Like, so Purdeep, like you talk about guys that have these, like the things from their past that, affect them now. And you work with these guys that have something that's super successful, achieved a lot, but they have something going back. And so I was going to ask you about, like, do you find that most of these guys get stuck in, like, say they have a problem with public speaking, every time they get up in front of their company, they freeze. Do they have a problem with correlating it to a different event with the same result in their past? Because I find that a lot, that guys like, I have a problem with public speaking. It must mean that it has something to do with the public speaking in my past.
Yeah, I think that is, I think that's very common. I think that correlation is definitely there for sure. What I find is that they defeat themselves prior to even doing the activity. And so they will tell themselves, and this comes back to beliefs and their core belief in terms of who they are, is a lot of people say, I'm not good at public speaking, right? And so, as you know, they defeat themselves before they even go up there. So correcting language, I love how you talk about biology, because biology is so important for how we operate and especially our state of mind. And so the biology of going into that state of public speaking is just as important, right? You got to have that physical posture. You got to have that mental space. And I do see the pattern, because when I see some of these people public speak, for example, you can see the pattern in their biology right before they even get up to stage. You can see how their biology isn't aligned, for example, at times, or you can tell before they go into a session or a speaking event whether they're going to kill it or not, just by the first few minutes before they actually get onto stage. So long story short, I think there is definitely a correlation to the past events. And again, going back to what you were saying, it's bringing that up. And I'm actually curious, like when you work with people, I'm actually curious of the type of people that you actually work with, because I think the listeners need to know as well. So if they need the help, they can reach out to you.
So it's a lot of guys like you. It's guys that are like 30 to 70 years old. They've had a lot of success in their careers. They've achieved a lot, and they're just, the best way I like to describe it is that they're walking along a path, and the path is a little rocky and throughout life, and they achieve a lot, and they get to a place where they see an open field, which is beautiful, flowers and trees and beaches and all the things. And so what happens is they get to the entrance to that field, and there's a glass wall in front of them. And they can't really see it, but so now they're bumping into this glass wall, and so they've reached this certain level, basically the mountaintop, and they have this glass wall that they can see everything that they want, but there's some sort of almost invisible layer that's blocking them from getting to that ultimate happiness. That, like, what do they do for the older guys? Like, what do you do when I'm about to leave and retire? Like, what am I going to do? Or younger guys like in their 30s and 40s, like, I've achieved all this and now I want to find love. Like, what do I do? And so it's what I work a lot with, is just because really what that glass wall is that's old stories and old patterns clogging up your bandwidth and blocking you, like you talk about, like blocking you from moving forward and leveling up. So removing that glass wall, looking at why that glass wall is there and just letting it melt away, and then they can just easily step into that field.
I love that analogy because that's so, I could totally relate to that. And I can see how other people can too, because you see that, okay, there's the grass is green there and it seems awesome to get. And you see other people even getting there, right? You see other guys in that field, but you're coming up against a glass wall. And it's so frustrating, especially for us guys, is that it's easy when we actually see the wall. If it was a brick wall, we'd be like, okay, how do we bust through this? How do we jump over it? How do we get around it, dig under it? But if there's a glass wall there and we can't see it, that's 10 times more frustrating, because as guys, our natural tendency is to fix things and be able to get through those challenges. So I think that's a brilliant analogy, and I think so many people can relate to that. I'm actually going to throw it back at Justin here, because I'm curious from the physical standpoint. For when you work with people specifically, we're talking about mindset. How, and Sam touched on it in terms of the biology, because you help people. And I love what you say in terms of, how do you say, run your body like you run your business?
Exactly.
And so how do you see, or what do you use to change people through their biology? How do you get them to use their body to change how they feel and then operate?
So anytime that they always say movement is the best medicine. Why? Because movement changes your chemical makeup in your body. It changes the hormonal balance. It changes the way in which you think about things. And what it actually does, and I love this example, is it brings you back to the present. Anytime you're physically moving, anytime you're active, anytime you're engaging in something that's new, it brings you back to that present moment. And if you're driving right now, do not do this activity. But if you are, if you're not, definitely engage in this. So what I want you to do is close your eyes. Imagine looking upstream. And if you look far enough upstream, you're standing in the middle of this river, you're looking far enough upstream, you'll notice that the water seems to not be moving. And now imagine that to be the future. That you see the future, you know it's going to come, but you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about what's coming, and it seemingly doesn't come. If you turned around and looked downstream, and you looked far enough downstream, it looks like the water's not moving. And that's your past. But if you looked straight down at your feet, where your feet are, you would see the water flowing. You would see it moving, moving, moving. And that is with us, time. Time does not stop for anybody. And so what happens in the future will at some point become the present moment. What happened in the past at one point was the present moment. But the only thing that we can do is be present in the moment in which we are in. And Sam, I'm going to steal a quote from your boy Peter Crone. He goes, "What happened happened and couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't." And that's really what we do from the physical side in changing that biology. Is it makes people live in the present. It makes them understand that where we are, be where your feet are. That's what I often say, is be where your feet are. You can't, if something is coming up in the future, prepare now, act now, be in it. But don't live the anxiety twice. If it's going to be a bad event, it's going to be a shitty event, don't live it twice. If it was something tough that happened, you experienced a tough moment, let it go and focus on what you can change from the present moment. And so physically, getting back to your question, Purdeep, so often guys are, and girls for this matter as well, are fearful of stepping into this new level of fitness, or stepping into this new eating regimen, or stepping into this new morning or nighttime routine, because they don't know what the outcome is going to be. But what is the outcome? The outcome is the future. The outcome is upstream. The outcome is something that hasn't happened yet. But instead, if we just focus on the process, we focus of where your feet are. We focus of, okay, 1 hour before we go to bed, 1 hour before we want to be in bed, we focus on brushing our teeth. We focus on meditating. We focus on a little bit of stretching. We focus on our nightly tea. We focus on our CBD to help us go to sleep. Whatever it might be, if we focus of where our feet are, all of a sudden we don't have anxiety. Anxiety does not exist in the present. It doesn't exist at the moment that we are at, because we're so focused on where we're going. We're so focused on what we were actually doing that all of a sudden the future just happens. And that moment just rolls into us. It's the epitome of creating change, is being where your feet are. And that is kind of the biggest example that I can give of what that truly looks like.
That's amazing. That analogy is so good. I mean, it's so real too. You're sitting there, it's like, it's legit still, and you're right there. It's rushing over your feet. It brought up for me, it made me think, part of that fear that trepidation that people feel about going into something like that is because they're so worried about how is this going to happen? How am I going to do this? And this, we want to cycle back and take it a level deeper. It's, they don't believe in themselves. People have this like self-doubt, this self-limiting belief, because again, past pain has proven something happened in the past where this didn't go well for me. And so, if you can just do, like, even if you're in the river and say it's like a rushing river, like, you got to pretty much focus on where your feet are. Otherwise that river is going to take you. So life, if you want to really be present, put a little danger into your life, or I'd like to say, put a little drama into it, like, make it matter. And so, like, if you're in that river and it's rushing and you take a wrong step, you're going to fall in the river and get taken away. So life is the same way. If you can be present and make sure that every step is done well and done right and done to the best of your abilities, everything will take care of itself.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to share something, actually, because I had this conversation with a gentleman yesterday when it comes to the outcomes versus activity, because I think we're so focused on outcomes and we're so goal driven. Obviously, as men, that's just our natural tendency. But again, I think from a society perspective, we're so focused on goal setting and goal achievement that we forget about the actual activity, doing what we enjoy doing. And what stemmed that was what you just said, Justin, is you got to be focused on the process, right? Be where your feet are. And I think that's so important, because I think there's a quote from Rumi that says, you're not entitled to the fruits of your labor. You're entitled to the labor itself. So, which really hit home for me. And it really hit home for the reason that I also grew up on an orchard and we grew fruit. And what we realized was we could work 9 months out of the entire year, like work our butts off. And at the last minute, right before harvest, our entire crop could be wiped out from a 10-minute hailstorm. So we grew apples and cherries. We still do. And it still happens. It happens every 3 or 4 years. And we dread that day. And it's one of the most painful days that we have if it happens, when it happens. But it taught us a real lesson early on, is that we have to be okay with it, because we have to enjoy the process, that 9 months of actually doing the labor, of actually doing all the activities to get to the point where we can actually pick the fruit, for us to actually live a happy life. Because if we just focused on picking the fruit and actually making the money off the fruit, we would have been miserable, because the entire year would have been gone. So it was a big lesson. I think we forget about that in today's society, is that we forget about, hey, look, let's just focus on what we're doing. Let's enjoy it. Unless we're doing things like having sex or stuff like that, right? Those kinds of things we can get into. But everything else is kind of like, let's just finish what we're doing now so we can get on to what we need to do next. And if we think about that, that's how most people live. And we have to catch ourselves. And sometimes I'm guilty of it too. But I think there's a point in society, and maybe I'm getting a little bit philosophical here, but we have technology which has helped the world tremendously. It's helped the impoverished, basically. It's helped people in countries that would normally not be able to function, to be able to function effectively and feed their families and so forth. But what it's done is it's created so much convenience that no one wants to sit in the moment anymore. No one wants to actually enjoy the activities. It's all about, okay, let's automate this so we can, I don't even know. There's that movie, guys, if you guys can help me out, it's an animated movie with that little robot. Is it called Wall-E?
Is it iRobot?
No, it's not iRobot. It's an animated, I think it's a Disney.
I think Wall-E, like WALL-E or something like that. Yeah.
If you take a look at that movie, that movie really hits home for me. And it hits home because you have this technology. There's people, colonies on these spaceships where these guys and gals are sitting on these lounge couches, which can float around, and they get food brought to them, and they're watching big screen TVs. They're literally doing nothing 24/7, and everything is done for them. And they're just they've turned into these overweight slobs. And you wonder, is that the society that we're going to? Because everything is about convenience. No one wants to enjoy actually the labor. Sometimes that labor is tough, right? Justin, you're working with guys that have to physically do exercise. It's not easy. I'm sure you're not giving them workouts where just kind of like, yeah, this is nothing. You're giving them workouts where they're working their butts off. And same thing with you, Sam. You're giving them stuff where they actually have to feel the challenge. And I think we get so used to not being challenged. And again, Sam, it goes back to what you said, and you, Justin, is doing some things that are just tough for you and enjoying the process. So that was kind of my little rant, because those things just popped up in my head. Is we got to enjoy what we do, not just the fruits of what we do.
No, you're exactly right, Purdeep. And to be honest, we kind of come full circle here, because by simply focusing on what you're doing, by focusing on the journey, by being present, by doing the hard things, the more hard things you do, watch how your mindset changes. Watch how you build credibility with yourself. Watch how that one hard task leads to you getting excited about the next hard task, because going back to what Sam said, you've now created a new version of a memory that enhances the way that you go into the next one. But what did it start with? It started with being present. It started with being present and actively choosing to dive into that hard task, do it, complete it, and make it a memory that now allows you to be even more present and dive into that next hard task that you're going into. And that is how you completely change the cycle. That is how you can completely redefine that loop in which you're operating to break through that glass door that Sam was talking about.
Yeah, you got to fall in love with the process. You got to. And one of the biggest perspective shifts you can have is realizing that, like, say in the gym, like you want to, squat 315. Like you get to, if you just like go into the gym and squat 315, you'll be like, oh, big deal. But if you can look at the process and say, who am I going to become in this process? Because really, when you get to that 315 and you look back, you're going to say, the man that I had to become in this process is way more important than the 315. The 315 is anticlimactic. And it's the same way with like earning money, or even like finding a girlfriend and falling in love. Like the process of becoming the person you had to become to achieve that is way more valuable. And when you can just take gratitude and honor that, the process becomes that more important than the goal.
That's huge, Sam. And it's absolutely brilliant way to end, because it's all about who you become. It's all about the person that gets brought out in you by doing the things that you ultimately end up getting, that bring you to that new field that becomes your playground.
Yeah. I have one more thing to add to that. So one of the hugest parts of like becoming that person is having discipline. People hate the word discipline. Everyone shies away from it. My thing is, what I work with my clients, I make the perspective shift there is discipline is nothing but the highest form of self-love. If you love yourself enough, you will be disciplined.
It's great. It's absolutely awesome. Sam, where can people hear more about you? Where can people find you? Where can people interact with you?
So Instagram is where I do the majority of my work, and that's at Sam Gibbs Morris. That's with 2 B's. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Sam Morris, just my name. Picture of a guy with a cowboy hat on. And then my my new website is going to launch next week. It's samgibbsmorris.com.
Fantastic. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. At the end of every episode, we always give a quick summary, so something that people can take away. So listeners, as you dive into this, allow yourself to truly sit in the moment. Sit in the presence of what's around you, whether it's discomfort, whether it's pain, whether it's joy, but be present with whatever it is that you're feeling. And understand that by sitting in that presence, you're going to be more articulate, you're going to be more productive, you're going to be more efficient. And that goal of whatever is in the future, wherever you're looking to, is not just going to be an outcome and collecting more trophies, collecting more golden stars, but rather changing you as a person and becoming the person that will be able to handle everything that's coming into that future present moment. So with that, guys, stay hungry, stay humble, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for joining us for another week of the Coaches Council. If it wasn't for you viewers and listeners, we wouldn't have a platform. So again, it's all about you guys. And we want to give you a reward just for listening. We want to give you access to each one of our coaches for a little bit deeper, intimate experience. So if you go to coaches-council.com, coaches-council.com, subscribe and like to whatever platform you're viewing on, you're going to be entered to have that one-on-one experience. So be sure to go coaches-council.com and really interact with us, because we would love to interact with you. Until then, stay safe, stay hungry, stay humble, and thanks for listening.